Maybe we can just start by first thinking about how you first discovered context.
So I suppose I discovered context during graduate school when I joined the ASA. And so I started getting it in the mail. And because I'd worked as a journalist before I decided to go back to graduate school for sociology, I was really excited because it seemed like it really married sort of my interests in accessible writing and storytelling and also the sociology. So that was my first exposure was as a grad student.
Awesome. And so did that sort of like connection and your background in journalism sort of maybe motivate your desire to want to publish with context?
Yeah, definitely. So that, I mean, it became sort of for lack of a cornier way to put it, it was like a professional bucket list item, I suppose, is to publish research in context, right? So wanting to write in a way that I could send the article to someone in my family who's not familiar with sociology and has varying, levels of educational attainment, but also reach sociologists maybe that aren't typically reading the journals that I'm publishing in, made publishing in context really exciting.
Great. So with that in mind, do you want to walk us through the main argument of your feature article in this issue and thinking about sort of like what you want readers to take away from that?
Sure. So, like a lot of sociologists, or I suppose researchers in general, my interest in this came out of personal experience and kind of interactions with my mother in particular, and thinking about age, right? And we often think of age as this kind of monolithic idea as chronological age, which is just how old are you, right? And that's how we think about age. Um, when in reality, age can mean so many different things that I wanted to unpack a little bit more, in particular, thinking about perceived age and how oftentimes that differs from our chronological age that may impact our daily lives in ways that maybe are understudied, right, or underappreciated. So then, as I was kind of thinking about this, right, perceived age versus chronological age and other ways that we can sort of measure and think about age, I wanted to then think more about how does ageism, which we also, I think, the general public or maybe even sociologists have this idea that pops into their head when we think about ageism, which is, prejudice and discrimination against older adults, right? And I think there's some more nuance that's generally accepted in terms of it can also include younger adults and stereotypes about younger adults or younger people in general. But also thinking about how ageism can operate really differently when it intersects with other forms of discrimination, right? So, how does ageism operate when it interlocks with sexism or racism, right? Or gendered racism is what my study in particular is looking at, right? So thinking about ageism and racism and gendered racism as more nuanced, right? How can we think about ageism more intersectionally and also problematizing this idea that looking youthful is always good or kind of inherently beneficial, and that the benefit that people can garner from looking youthful can really vary depending on their other positionalities, right? That makes looking at ageism intersectionally really important. I suppose that's kind of my key takeaway, right? Is kind of one that we need to think about ageism and kind of complicate how we may automatically think about ageism and how it intersects with other forms of oppression, but also in particular centering Black women's experiences at work, right? And considering how this intersection of these different forms of oppression can affect Black women at work in really problematic ways, that for a long time, a lot of Black women have thought about this and have strategized how to cope with it in ways that can be really stressful and harmful and detrimental to their careers and just day-to-day life.
Hmm. I think you kind of hinted at it there a bit, but I guess maybe putting it more explicitly, how do you think your ideas are like relevant to the broader public?
Sure, yeah, I think the broader public certainly thinks of looking youthful as the ideal, and are kind of fed this by the media and social media, and always kind of striving for ways that we can look more youthful. And that I think kind of intersects with health sometimes and taking care of our bodies. But I think that I would want the broader public to think more critically about this, right? That looking youthful can be beneficial in particular contexts. And again, kind of depending on who you are and how you present to the world, right? You're in terms of your racial identity or your gender identity or other identities perhaps as well. And so for my study in particular, I would want people to take away that this can have really important implications in the workplace that should be considered. And hopefully that we can have more nuanced conversations about DEI that can include kind of hopefully a more deeper understanding of the repercussions of these various forms of oppression and kind of the invisible labor that Black women in particular are doing in order to ward off the effects of these things.